A well-written twist can turn a good movie into a great movie, but it's a two-way street. Whether they're too far-fetched or just too obvious, these are the twists that took otherwise solid movies and dragged them through the gutter. It's almost impossible to remake a movie that already has an all-time great plot twist.
Oh my God. I'm back. I'm home.
You can't just repeat it verbatim, which means you have to make it your own. That's exactly what director Tim Burton tried to do with his Planet of the Apes remake. But the key word there is tried. In fairness, the film as a whole has a lot to like. The makeup is extraordinary, and the big budget allowed for a massive scale. The problem is its bizarre twist. Our protagonist travels back to Earth through an electromagnetic storm, only to discover that the film's ape villain, General Thade, managed to beat him there by several hundred years and win the Civil War? At least that's our best guess as to why he's the new face of the Lincoln Memorial, but that raises a whole lot of other questions, like, why is that monument even there at all? Or, more generally, what the hell even happened? There's nothing wrong with an ending that prompts questions, but they should come in response to things that the movie actually implied with other plot points. This was totally out of left field, and undermined what could have been a legitimately impressive remake. The Forgotten starts out with an interesting enough premise. A mother whose son passed away in a plane crash 14 months earlier wakes up one day to find all evidence of his existence has been erased. Nobody, not even his own father, remembers him. As she tries to unravel the mystery, she discovers a conspiracy far larger than she could have expected. Now, if things had stayed in this conspiratorial vein, it'd be a pretty cool thriller. Unfortunately, this is where the movie gets weird, and not in a cool way. It's eventually revealed that aliens are the ones who erased the sun's existence, turning what would be the makings of a pretty solid and accessible conspiracy thriller into a perplexing sci-fi story. The big issue with this twist is that it makes little to no sense in the grand scheme of the story. Its implications are never fully realized, and nobody seems to have an appropriate reaction to the fact that memory-stealing aliens exist. Julianne Moore still does a great job as the lead, but even she can only do so much with such tepid writing. Star Trek Into Darkness was J.J. Abrams' second entry in the modern Star Trek franchise, and it's considered by many to be one of the worst Star Trek movies out there. That's largely because of the fact that the filmmakers decided to cast Benedict Cumberbatch as the film's big bad, only to reveal halfway through the movie that he's actually someone Star Trek fans already know. Now, Cumberbatch himself isn't the problem here. Even writing Khan into the story wasn't a terrible idea. The issue is that they decided to make Khan's identity feel like some weighty reveal when it really didn't matter that much in terms of the story. And while that has a lot to do with this just being a bad movie in general, it kind of feels like they threw Khan into the mix to appease fans of the classic Star Trek movies rather than for any reason having to do with the film's themes or plot as a whole. We get it. Kirk yelled Khan's name in one of the OG Star Trek movies. That doesn't excuse the fact that the movie as a whole is completely unsatisfying. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has made its name on the back of big twists, and to be fair, it usually handles them pretty well. But the minds behind the MCU often find ways to take things they usually do well and screw them up royally. And that's exactly what happened in Iron Man 3. Tony Stark's first solo adventure since battling aliens in Avengers saw Iron Man facing off against the henchmen of a notorious terrorist leader known as the Mandarin. The classic comics villain was reimagined into a Middle Eastern jihadist played by Ben Kingsley. And much like with Star Trek, it wasn't the character's introduction or the actor that was the problem. In fact, Kingsley kills it as the dedicated terrorist mastermind until we learn that he's really Trevor Slattery, a bumbling British actor hired to play the role by the real villain, Guy Pearce's Aldrich Killian. The switch-up was so abrupt and disconcerting that it left a sour taste in many viewers' mouths and turned what was a fascinating character into a joke.
They approached me about the role, and they knew about the drugs.
What did they say? They'd get you off them?
Said they'd give me more.
Thankfully, Marvel eventually wised up, later revealing that the real Mandarin was Xu Wenwu. Though, weirdly, Marvel keeps bringing Slattery back. He's even slated to have a major role in Wonder Man. The first three Indiana Jones movies were long considered one of the greatest movie trilogies of all time, so execs decided it was only natural to tarnish its legacy for money. In 2008, we got Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and the studio got a whole lot of ticked-off fans. There was a lot wrong with this movie. But probably the most glaring issue was how poorly the disappointing twist fit with the rest of the Indiana Jones universe. Up to that point, Indiana Jones had dipped into the supernatural but still felt somewhat grounded within its world. The mystical elements in the previous films had all been centered on religious themes that made sense, considering Jones was a professor of archaeology who hunted for artifacts with religious significance. So any godlike powers that revealed themselves felt pretty organic. Crystal Skull's sudden shift into outer space and other dimensions just feels totally out of place, and remains one of the more baffling creative decisions made for the franchise. And that includes the time travel in Dial of Destiny. The dystopian effects of climate change have been the inspiration for a lot of great movies over the years, but the concepts inspired some duds as well. In 2008, M. Night Shyamalan gave us his take on the genre with The Happening, only we didn't know that going in. The Happening is a mind-bending thriller that stars Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel as a young couple caught up in worldwide hysteria as a series of unexplained mass deaths occur across the globe. It's a nail-biting story where the danger escalates and the tension ratchets up pretty steadily. The audience spends much of the runtime on the edge of their seats, wondering what the real cause of this devastating mystery might be. So millions of people were pretty disappointed when the evil force turned out to be plants.
Just going to talk in a very positive manner, giving off good vibes. We're just here to use the bathroom.
The big reveal is that the world's plant life got really angry at humans for abusing the planet and is striking back with this vengeful attack on mankind. It's honestly not the worst idea for a movie, but the way it plays out feels really forced. The twist really comes out of nowhere and with so little explanation that it feels more like magic than a biological response. Again, that wouldn't be a bad idea for a movie on its own, but in a universe where there really isn't anything else mystical happening, the reveal felt unjustified and totally fell flat. The Star Wars sequel trilogy started off relatively promising with The Force Awakens, but the two films that followed were so divisive they shook many people's faith in the franchise as a whole. Possibly the worst offender was the third film, The Rise of Skywalker, which abruptly shifts from fun adventure to an exasperating disappointment, thanks to the return of a long-dead villain and a series of pointless reveals that come with it. For those living under a rock, we learn in The Last Jedi that the young Jedi Rey has no nobility in her ancestry. Instead, she was sold by her parents for money as a child. Then came The Rise of Skywalker and this infamous line,
"Somehow Palpatine returned."
And Palpatine's return was just one of a slew of disappointing reveals to come out of this movie. We soon come to find that Snoke was Palpatine's puppet, completely undermining one of the main villains in the previous two movies. And worst of all, Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter. And just like that, the writers completely undid one of the only interesting plot points from The Last Jedi, while simultaneously making us all picture that decrepit Sith Lord procreating. We doubt anyone's surprised this one made it on the list, but that doesn't make coping with this disaster any easier. In 2008, Cloverfield took cinemas by storm when it brought the world of sci-fi monsters into the found footage scene. With producer J.J. Abrams on board, it was both a thrilling adventure and a terrifying disaster flick. But things got a little bumpy when they tried to turn it into a franchise with 2016's 10 Cloverfield Lane. The problem was that 10 Cloverfield Lane felt completely different from the original, and only reveals its connection to Cloverfield in its bizarre twist ending. The film follows a young woman named Michelle, who's taken captive by a paranoid man named Howard. Howard insists there's been a massive cataclysm outside, and he's keeping Michelle in his basement for her own protection.
I'm not sure yet if it's chemical or nuclear, but down here we're safe.
If that were the whole movie, it'd make a pretty chilling thriller about paranoia and isolationism. Evidently, the writers thought so too, as the movie wasn't actually written as a Cloverfield sequel. It was only after Paramount scooped up the script, made some minor changes, and slapped the Cloverfield name on it that it became the film we know today. One of the biggest changes was the final twist, which sees Michelle escape from captivity only to discover there's an alien invasion taking place. All at once, a cool thriller ripe for an ambiguous ending turned into little more than sci-fi schlock as we watch her fend off an attack from a hideous monster that arrives in a spaceship. Identity is a chilling crime thriller that begins in a rural, rain-soaked motel where a group of strangers are being picked off one by an unseen killer. As they try to live through the night and identify the killer, everyone is forced to gather evidence and form shaky alliances to have any hope of surviving. Meanwhile, in a faraway courtroom, convicted mass killer Malcolm Rivers' execution is delayed at the last minute thanks to new evidence. So, how are those two plot lines connected? Well, don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to. It turns out all the characters at the motel are just figments of Rivers' imagination. And if that age-old cliché wasn't bad enough, the whole narrative is blamed on the fact that Rivers has dissociative identity disorder. Even back in 2003, this cheesy depiction of a very real illness was already dated, and you could see the reveal coming from a mile away. And even if you couldn't, Identity really forces it down your throat with a series of pointless flashbacks. It takes absolutely genius writing to make the "it was all in their head" trope remotely justifiable, and Identity didn't even come close. When the MCU was still in its infancy, 2008's Hancock came out and flipped the superhero genre on its head. The action comedy starred Will Smith as a hard-drinking, superpowered crime fighter that really wasn't all that heroic. On top of that, we learn that Hancock has no memory of who he really is or how he got his powers.
The nurse asked me for my John Hancock. So I actually thought that's who I was.
The bulk of the film follows the faulty hero's attempts to rehabilitate his image with the help of a PR consultant named Ray. It's a pretty compelling character study of a complicated hero, but things start to fall apart in the second half as we learn more and more about Hancock's mysterious background. That all comes to a head when it's revealed that Ray's wife, Mary, is also an immortal superhero who has a romantic history with Hancock. And that's kind of it. The bad guy gets thwarted, and the movie ends. The truth about Mary doesn't really inform the rest of the film in any meaningful way, it just adds a confusing layer of family drama. Though we do get a cool action sequence out of the conflict, so it could have been worse. This isn't the first Shyamalan movie to pop up on this list, and it won't be the last. The sad thing is, Old had a lot going for it. An adaptation of the graphic novel Sandcastle, Old follows a group of beachgoers who happen upon a mysterious cave where the normal laws of time and space don't seem to apply. Suspense builds effectively as the characters start aging at an alarming rate. We're talking years passing by in minutes, and they struggle to escape with their lives before it's too late.
You're 11, right, Trent?
I'm 6.
It's an intriguing premise that had the potential to be one of its filmmaker's best, but things fall short near the end. In the comic, the beach's otherworldly phenomena is left open to interpretation. In the movie, it turns out to be a pharmaceutical company's sinister experiment, taking what was once a vibey supernatural thriller and spinning it unnecessarily back into reality. The end also feels rushed, as every loose end gets addressed so fast that what should have been a wild ride feels almost like satire by the end. Nicolas Cage's career has run the gamut from cheesy 90s action to art house masterpieces, and 2009's Knowing fell right in between those two extremes. It tells the story of Cage's John, who becomes privy to an impending cataclysmic event after his son starts hearing mysterious voices and uncovers a cryptic, decades-old prophecy. As far as end-of-the-world movies go, Knowing is pretty solid. As the final few predictions unfold, we get some of the best disaster scenes ever. But when it comes time for the final apocalyptic event, a solar flare that will wipe out all life on Earth, the film stumbles to the finish line thanks to one final twist. It turns out the voices that John's son, along with countless children around the world, have been hearing belong to benevolent aliens who will save a fraction of humanity from extinction. At least, they might be aliens, or maybe angels. We're not really clear on this one, and Knowing never bothers to explain. Instead, it throws in just enough biblical and sci-fi clues to muddle any clear answer. And while the film certainly deserves props for actually following through with its doomsday promises, the twist brings it to a pretty awkward conclusion. In summer 2002, M. Night Shyamalan was still fresh off the success of The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable when he returned with his next project, Signs. It follows single father and widower Graham Hess and his family, as their farm and the world at large are plagued by inexplicable crop circles and mysterious lights in the sky. Well, those strange sights eventually turn into a full-blown alien invasion, and the Hess family becomes the audience's window into humanity's struggle for survival. A slow burn packed with drama and truly terrifying scenes, Signs is hailed as one of Shyamalan's best by many. The issue is that, in a final confrontation between the Hess family and their otherworldly invaders, it's revealed that the aliens have a very convenient weakness: water. If you ask us, if an alien civilization is advanced enough to invade another planet, it seems a little far-fetched that they be thwarted by something so simple and abundantly available. It really takes you out of what's otherwise a pretty immersive experience, turning what should be a sci-fi classic into just another Shyamalan movie with a weird twist. Directed by Michael Bay, The Island is probably more infamous than famous. The film depicts a society in the near future where its residents are told the world is too contaminated to sustain life. with the exception of one utopian island. These days, the film's probably more known for containing footage that was reused in another one of Bay's movies, and for giving away its biggest plot twist in the trailer.
You're copies of people. So one of them gets sick and they need a new part, they take it from you.
That's right, the entire population is just a group of clones intended to be organ donors for the rich. While we commend Bay for attempting to go a little bit deeper with his themes than some of his other over-the-top popcorn movies, the symbolism is so ham-fisted and the plot is so predictable, most people probably didn't even need the trailer to see the twist coming. In fact, it's so obvious what's going on that you might expect that trailer reveal to be some sort of bait and switch for the audience. But then the truth comes out, and it turns out the movie really is just that bland. Director Martin Scorsese is considered by many to be the greatest director of all time, and for good reason. And while 2010's Shutter Island definitely deserves the acclaim it gets, the psychological crime thriller tapers out a little bit at the very end. Set in 1954, the film stars Leonardo DiCaprio as U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels, who travels to the enigmatic Shutter Island to investigate the disappearance of a patient at the Ashcliffe Hospital for the Criminally Insane. The movie has a number of great twists and turns, but the very last one is a bit of a letdown. After 2 very suspenseful hours, the audience and Teddy get the rug pulled from under them when it's revealed that our hero is actually Andrew Laeddis, a violent and delusional patient admitted to Ashcliffe after killing his wife. He then learns his entire investigation was a role play his doctors designed around his delusions as a radical form of treatment.
If we let you play this out, we could get you to see how untrue, how impossible it is.
It's an emotional reveal to be sure, but the fact that so much of the setting and plot were fabricated takes away much of the film's intensity and leaves the viewer feeling as bamboozled as Laeddis himself. Another Shyamalan movie to make the list, 2023's Knock at the Cabin, is about a family spending some time alone in a remote cabin when a group of strangers arrive and take them prisoner. The intruders believe that the end of the world is coming, and the only way it will stop is if someone in the family dies. It's a chilling setup, but the ending is anything but. Much like 10 Cloverfield Lane, we spend most of the movie wondering whether the antagonists are telling the truth or if they've simply gone violently mad. The problem with Knock at the Cabin is that its twist is more of a reverse twist, as it turns out the attackers were right all along. The end of the world is coming, and someone must die to stop it. It feels like Shyamalan was almost trying to take his reputation for making movies with absurd twists and turn it on its head. But the whole thing just unfurls like a wet blanket and falls to the floor with a deep thud. What's amazing about our next entry is that most people agree the twist ruined the rest of the film, and yet it got 2 sequels. Released in 2013, Now You See Me stars Jesse Eisenberg, Isla Fisher, Woody Harrelson, and Dave Franco as the Four Horsemen, a group of magicians who claim to steal from the rich and give to their fans. The film's antagonists are Mark Ruffalo's Dylan Rhodes, an FBI agent who spends much of the movie gathering evidence against the miscreant magicians, and Morgan Freeman's Thaddeus Bradley, a critic famous for figuring out illusions and ruining magicians' careers. The bulk of the movie is actually pretty fun. The central cast of characters are all pretty likable, and much of the film is fast-paced chase scenes and nail-biting escapes. And then, at the very end, we learn that Rhodes is actually on the Four Horsemen's side. He himself is a magician, and he's actually spent the film trying to get revenge on Bradley for ruining his late father's career. The problem is that there are virtually no clues throughout the entire film to hint at Rhodes' true identity. The twist is so abrupt and clumsily delivered that it feels like the writers only threw it in because they couldn't think of anything better. One of the most iconic franchises in all of horror, Friday the 13th is also one of the most bizarre. It kicked off with a standard slasher flick way back in 1980, but eventually transformed into an absurd series of romps that saw silent killer Jacent go everywhere from summer camp to the streets of Manhattan and outer space. But before the series truly went off the rails, it tried to do something a little different that just barely missed the mark. Following the events of the previous film, 1984's The Final Chapter, Part 5 sees Tommy still reeling from his run-in with Jacent. In a bloody battle, he managed to kill Jacent, or so he thought, and finally put a stop to the masked killer's reign of terror. But all that changes when the bodies start to pile up and it turns out Jacent has returned, Palpatine style, to kill again. Except, he hasn't. The killer is actually a grieving father who has taken on the Jacent persona to grapple with the death of his son. It's a convoluted twist from completely out of nowhere that hasn't sat right with fans since the film debuted. While taking risks and trying something new should earn such a long-running series some praise, this one just didn't land. Jim Carrey may be best known as a comedy actor, but he's no stranger to more serious films either. Unfortunately, amid classics like The Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, there are some duds, like the number 23. Carrey plays Walter Sparrow, a man whose life is turned upside down after he's consumed by the number 23, a novel that bears striking similarities to his own life. The eeriest of these is a storyline that seems to mirror the real unsolved killing of a woman named Laura Tollins, so Walter starts looking for answers. Though it gets off to a genuinely intriguing start, problems quickly arise in the storytelling. The film is clunky, hard to follow, and at times genuinely difficult to watch. And it all falls apart when Sparrow's search for the truth leads him to believe his wife, Agatha, is the one behind the crime. But we soon discover that it was Sparrow himself who killed Laura, and that he wrote the book as a twisted confession before losing his memory. It all amounts to a meandering mess. Maybe a few tweaks could have saved the number 23, but that only makes it all the more frustrating. Arguably one of the most dynamic actors in modern cinema, Joaquin Phoenix has killed it in everything from blockbusters like Gladiator to more art house titles like Her. At this point, he's no stranger to unique projects, and so people were absolutely salivating when it came out he was going to star in A24's Beau Is Afraid. Unfortunately, it wound up being a more middling final product than people are used to from the studio, and that's largely due to how absolutely absurd the ending is. Set at the crossroads between reality and fantasy, Beau Is Afraid follows a man as he attempts to solve the mystery of his late father's passing. He hopes he'll get the truth by confronting his mother, and embarks on a long, surreal journey to reach her. Unfortunately, the answers he gets only leave him and the audience with more questions. It turns out Beau's father never actually died. Instead, he's been kept prisoner by his mother all these years. Oh, and he's not even human, but a monstrous, phallus-shaped creature. It's a lot to unpack, and audiences have come up with plenty of different interpretations, but the twist ending was ultimately one step too far for an already bafflingly strange movie.
There's nothing wrong with a simple romance movie, and as far as that element goes, Remember Me isn't too bad. Its leads, Robert Pattinson and Emily DeRavin, are solid enough in their roles and boast some nice chemistry. And while it may veer into cliché, the film still certainly has its charms. But all of that goes completely and inexplicably down the drain in the movie's final moments. The film has become infamous for its final act, which reveals that the entire story has been leading up to Robert Pattinson's character being in the World Trade Center on September 11th. It's a subject matter that Remember Me bungles badly, taking a horrific tragedy and using it as cheap emotional manipulation.
I mean, why aren't you riveted?
Aside from being deeply insensitive, it's also a case of blown potential, as the romantic drama is just fine without resorting to the careless and contrived finale. The biggest problem with The Village is that its twist turns into a much worse movie. Writer-director M. Night Shyamalan's last act plot twists helped launch his career, but they ended up becoming notorious to the point of parody after this one. The horror film appears to center on a small 19th century village, which has been surrounded by mysterious monsters. But it's actually revealed that the creatures don't exist. They're just the town elders in costume, trying to scare people into staying put in their safe community. That's all well and good enough until the second twist arrives to reveal the film actually takes place in the modern day. And the village elders created these monsters to keep their people protected from the woes of the outside world. With just the first twist in place, the movie might work as a solid social commentary, but the second rug pull makes the movie needlessly convoluted. Given the film's title, it's not surprising that Spectre centers on the villainous organization headed up by Ernst Blofeld, one of 007's greatest villains. Or that Christoph Waltz was brought in to portray the criminal mastermind, despite some slack attempts at secrecy.
So thank you, cuckoo.
But instead of simply rebooting the iconic villain, Waltz's character is also eventually revealed to be Bond's adopted brother, making a surprise return after faking his own death. The twist is completely superfluous. The original Blofeld is a force of pure evil, and he doesn't need to be tied to Bond in any way to be effective. The revelation that Bond has a secret brother who ended up orchestrating the events in the previous Daniel Craig-led Bond films strains all credibility for his run in the franchise.
It was all me, James. It's always been me, the author of all your pain.
Put simply, it's a twist that twists too hard. Oliver Stone's film adaptation of Savages initially seems to end like the book, with the demise of basically every character providing a sort of closure. It also fits in well with the way the storytellers want viewers to see the three main characters. They're too wild for this world, and it only makes sense for them to go out in a blaze of glory. Unfortunately, Stone tacks on a twist wherein the ending is revealed to be an elaborate fantasy playing out in the head of one character. Instead, the bad guys get arrested and the good guys get out clean, riding off into the sunset. This disjointed happy ending isn't just a cheat, it feels like a painfully safe move. When crafting a good plot twist, it's incredibly important to consider whether it upends the plausibility of the story. Unfortunately for High Tension, its Hail Mary of a twist ending, in which the killer is revealed to be a dissociative identity of the protagonist, sends plausibility down the drain. The film, up until that point, is a pretty straightforward slasher that stands out for its artful gore. So, why the needless twist? Shots filmed from the villain's point of view make little sense after the twist, and the film's opening is even more confusing when it's watched while knowing who the killer turns out to be. Speaking of misuse of dissociative identity disorder, Secret Window also stumbles in its presentation of the illness. It should be a slam dunk of a movie. Based on a Stephen King short story, it's about a writer who retreats to a cabin in the woods to craft his next book, only to be confronted by a deranged stranger named Shooter, who claims he has plagiarized one of his works.
You stole my story.
Tensions between the two escalate and eventually turn to violence. The twist is that Shooter doesn't exist, and is instead a result of our lead's mental unwellness, which, conveniently, has never manifested in the movie until this moment. Sometimes this twist works, like with Fight Club and Primal Fear, but in Secret Window, it comes off as uninspired, which is ironic considering how much we hear about stories needing to stick the landing throughout.
The only thing that matters is the ending.
The first film in the Scream franchise features a twist that is revelatory for the horror genre. There are two culprits behind the film's slaughter spree, not just one.
Surprise, Sydney.
The twist is so good that it's repeated in the sequel, Scream 2, and mostly still works. For the third film, though, the filmmakers go with a new twist, and it ends up being just plain dumb. Part of the reason the first two films in the franchise enjoy such reverence is that they function as critiques of the genre. They're self-aware and skewer the typical tropes that had started to bore audiences. The problem with Scream 3's needlessly complicated reveal is that it resembles something from the films the franchise itself satirizes. The revelation that the baddie in this film is Scream protagonist Sidney's secret half-brother, and that he has effectively orchestrated the events of the entire series, is completely unbelievable. It's a jump-the-shark moment in a franchise that scoffs at cliché and closes out the original series with a whimper instead of, well, a scream. But hey, credit for trying to tie everything together and save the story.
If you find yourself dealing with an unexpected backstory and a preponderance of exposition, then the sequel rules do not apply.